Hi, everybody. I'm Kat Margulis, and I'm the host of The Power of Story. And as a longtime journalist, author, and book coach, I see story everywhere I go. And in recent years, I've had the opportunity to see how story can transform our lives and our businesses. And that's what I want to explore with you and my guests through this series is how you can create the life, the business, and the legacy of your dreams through story. And today I have with me Paul Epstein. Paul has spent nearly 15 years as a professional sports executive for multiple NFL and NBA teams, a global sports agency, and the NFL league office, where he's broken every premium revenue metric in Super Bowl history, and where he became known as the Why Coach. Today, Paul is a global keynote speaker. He serves as Chief Impact Officer for PurposePoint and Chief Purpose Advisor for the Why Institute. He is also the best-selling author of The Power of Playing Offense and host of the podcast Playmakers on Purpose. Hi, Paul. Thank you for being on the show.
Fired up to be here, Kat.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I love that you're a why coach, especially through these interviews. It's really coming forward how important your why is, how important your audience's why is, your character's why. So I'd love to hear just your personal why story and this journey that you've gone on, and how you ended up here on stages supporting other people with finding out their why.
Yeah, no, I love starting here. And by the way, before we end this conversation, every single person listening in, we are going to provide you with a gift so you can find your personal why. So that is my promise and commitment by the time that we wrap up here. So my why is contribute. The way I would define contribute is to ignite impact. If I drill even deeper, I would say that impact is making a difference. And if you ask me to explain how I want to make a difference, I would say I want to leave people and places better than I found them. That's it. Like that is success. That is significance. That's what fuels my day-to-day decisions, behaviors, actions. But the backstory that led to being a why coach and why I'm so excited to be able to share this gift out with others is because finding my why changed my life. I was the head of sales for an NFL team, kid in a candy store, dream job, dream career. Life could be no better. And then I go to this retreat and I find my why. I started to unearth my core values. And I just got obsessed with how could I apply these on a day-to-day basis? Like I knew, because we've all been there, Kat. We go to all these events, whether big conferences or small retreats, and they fall in one of two categories. Most of them, unfortunately, because life happens, Monday morning hits, the inbox crushes us, and then we leave the conference feeling like we're going to conquer the world. And then a week later, we reflect back and poof, it's a sugar high. Like it's not a bad event. It's just, it's tough to have the discipline to activate everything we take from events. And then the very few, and this is what this retreat was for me, it can change your life. It can provide a personal transformation. It can become a part of your long-term story that you're going to tell for generations to come. And you mentioned the word legacy, and I think about how I want to be remembered. And my eulogy at the celebration of my life, I want people to say that he was a man of purpose. I want people to say that he was somebody that was connected to his why in a non-negotiable fashion. And so I go to this event, and when I get back into the office the next day, my team could tell that I was just radiating a different type of energy. And one person the following day came up to me and said, "Hey, that thing you did at the retreat, you think you could help me find my why?" And then, Kat, the next day, another person. So one leads to two, leads to 5, 10, nearly 50 people over the course of a year. It started on the business side of the NFL team. Then it actually hit the football side. And that's why organically, as a total side hustle and passion project on top of my day job, that's how I became known as the why coach. Even HR said, "Paul, water cooler buzz tells us that you're helping people find their why. Do you think you could implement this into our recruiting and our onboarding efforts?" So it became a thing. It was a thing. And I think this will resonate, but there's probably folks listening in that have had a passion project or two, or maybe a side hustle or two in their life. And there sometimes comes a point, and this is what we all hope for, where you fall more in love with your passion project than your day job. And it was at that moment where I knew, as blessed as I was in an amazing career, I knew that I had to graduate from career to calling because I felt like I found mine.
Ooh, career to calling. I love that. Oh, I'm so glad I started with that question because I'm gonna like throw these questions out now.
Yeah.
This is where we're called to go. We're going there. I love it because I hear you about people who have a sense of calling, or they have a desire, this inner thing that is brewing, and then Monday happens. And that is crushing. And I feel like I'm always cheerleading people that can't seem to swim to the surface and stay there. And I'm curious, like, and I don't talk to them about the why. Is the why the secret sauce to staying above water on your dreams?
It absolutely can,
Yeah.
but it has to be a non-negotiable. So your why is not, it should not be dictated by your mood, your energy, your attitude, because things happen.
Yeah.
There could be tragedy, crisis, setback, hurdle, obstacle. Like, life is hard. Adversity doesn't discriminate. We all know that. But that is even more the reason why you stay anchored to your why. So this is not a, let's do this in our spare time. This is not something that you institute only in hard times or only in good times. I actually think, I think it's easier to be disciplined in life, and whether it's to the why or anything else, in blue skies. When there are good conditions, when it's a good economy, when you have breaks going your way, then you tend to do things the right way. You tend to stick to your plan. But then adversity strikes. It could be a global pandemic. It could be an economic recession. It could be the loss of a job. It could be something that happens in your family. And I actually think that the way we show up in storms is what prepares us for the eventual long-term marathon, right? So Monday morning is a version of a storm. There are distractions galore. Other people are expecting things of you. Maybe you over-enjoyed the weekend, so you're in recovery mode. Whatever it is, I'm not knocking it. I'm saying that's humanity, that's reality. But I actually challenge people. And when you say rise above, Kat, here's a term that I want people to remember. Monday is separation season. It is where people, that's it. You win Monday, you separate from the pack, you rise above. And here's a cool way of thinking about it. You know what it is on a different scale? Think of the 12-month calendar. When do people kick their feet up? The holidays. November, December, people are not on the grind, unless you're an entrepreneur. And even then, that's kind of when you kick it a little bit. But those that are hungriest, they hit the gas even harder, because November, December are a form of separation season. Because we all know what happens January 1st. It's an arbitrary date. We make these new commitments and new goals, and boom. And then January 10th, where did they go? And look, I've been there. I've done it. I'm not judging. I'm saying the more that I have tapped into my why, that's what keeps me disciplined and committed to winning separation season. And I just choose to win Monday. Everybody fantasizes about Friday. I just say, thank God it's Monday. And I attack it.
I love that. Oh, I'm jazzed up. I'm ready to go now. I love that. I love that. What a great story. And I love that attitude and the energy that comes from that attitude and that posture. So thank you for that. And so you grew up in sales and business development, and you know about the power of persuasion.
Yeah.
What did you pull from that to help you become a better storyteller in the work that you do now?
Well, I think so. Sales is a great place to start this conversation, because if you were to poll the average person in the world and say, do you want to sell? Most people would say, hell no. There's kind of a negative rap and a negative brand around it, because, we've all had that used car sales experience. And if we haven't experienced it, we've seen it on TV, or a friend or a family member told us a horror story about some sleazeball okay. So if that's the brand, I realized that was the brand and the perception when I got into it. And I didn't like it as much as the next person. So I said, how can I be a disruptor and influence people in a positive way? And so what happened was I had to kind of detach from the day-to-day job, because if I just focus on my job, all you want to do is sell more widgets. It's a revenue game. It's a production game. It's a performance game. It's an achievement game. And I'm not knocking it, but I'm saying that's how we get away from who we are at our core. We're just so focused on the what, we ignore the who, we ignore the why. We over-index on the what, we do, and we ignore the being. And so when I thought about sales, I said, well, screw the widget. I've been selling myself my whole life. I like literally to get friends in kindergarten. We don't call it sales, but you want to be likable. You want to be popular, right? You want to, if you're competing to get into the next best school, or you want a spot on the team, or you want to start and you try to create a relationship with the coach, that's sales. You're not selling a widget. You're selling the most important product and service in the world, which is you. You are the most important product or service. And so if that's the case, everyone in the world is a salesperson, not professionally, but holistically, personally. And the way that you present yourself, your personal brand, is the DNA of your story. That is it. If you don't know who you are, how can you tell the story of you? And the better you tell the story of you, the more successful you're going to be, the more goals you're going to achieve, the happier you're going to be, the more fulfilled you're going to be, the greater purpose you're going to step into each day with, because that's the gap. Life either happens to you or for you. And the differentiator is how well connected and how self-aware you are. And I just think selling professionally connected the dots to something that I'd been doing from the Sandlot on up. That's
oh
it.
my God. I love this so much. Do you coach kids? I'm like, every teen and young adult has to hear this. Imagine hearing that at that self-defining stage, when we just start to come into our own, we start to separate from our parents, and we start to create an identity for ourselves. Imagine creating your identity for yourself with the why and with the story. That's incredible. I love that perspective.
Yeah. Kat, let me add one thing, because you brought up kids. And so I say this as a fairly new father. I'm a year and a half into my journey. Okay. So kiddo will be throwing that sand in the Sandlot in no time. I'm fired up for it. But if I could speak to a group of kids or even parents where the message would resonate and connect at a peer level, I would say this: when you think of stories, I think that we connect it mostly with our verbal communication. So as an example, there's extroverts in the world and there's introverts, and that's fine. We're wired how we're wired. It's not going to change. And so if that's the case, the extrovert just heard my response a few minutes ago and they're like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, man, I'm building relationships from 2 years on up. I came out of the womb building relationships. Okay, extrovert, me too. I get it. But what about the introverts? Here's where I would say, in a positive way, there are some advantages to not only being an introvert, but I think even extroverts can tap into it, which is the most important form of story can be behavioral. What you do is often more important than what you say. So if all of my behaviors, if I am a kind person, if I'm a person of compassion, if I am generally smiling, I have joy, I'm happy, you want to be around me because I have a certain energy level that people are magnetically attracted to, I may not have had to say very many words to project myself in those ways, and it's still forming my story. Story doesn't require words.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that. And yet, so I see. Okay. So I was asking you about storytelling in persuasion, and what did you now you talk on the stage, you speak on the stage, and I'm wondering, what have you pulled into for the speakers in this audience, for those kinds of storytellers? Was there something that you got from sales, or did you? Yeah, I'm curious.
100%. So my first technical sales job in the sports world was I was selling tickets for an NBA team that didn't win very many games. And so it was literally ESPN called us the worst brand in sports. And Sports Illustrated doubled down and said, you are the worst franchise in sports history. Good luck selling that. FYI, this was the 2005 LA Clippers in the shadows of the Lakers that had Kobe and Shaq. And so it was known as the redheaded stepchild of what was then Staples Center. And that's the entry-level job I had. I share this because I was able to have success versus a lot of others because I think they over-indexed on the product itself, which the product was not very sellable. I chose to sell myself. I chose to build relationships. This is sales 101. This is nothing groundbreaking that I'm saying, but I think we get so focused on the metrics and the goals and the numbers, and that requires a lot more of thinking about the product. I focused on, I'm going to close more when people buy Paul. And then because I positioned it as I am the concierge of your NBA experience, people were buying Paul. I was figuratively rolling a red carpet out for an experience. So I was treating their kids even better than the parents because I understood that's a lifelong memory in waiting if I step into this moment right now. And so now as a speaker, it's the same thing. Content is content. I speak about leadership. I speak to many sales teams. I speak about making better decisions faster, which is the title of my next book, but that's content. And I think it's juicy and I think it's valuable and I think it's life-changing. But if people don't buy Paul, the content will never survive.
Right.
Paul is the speaker. Paul is the salesperson, and you need to buy Paul. And if you buy Paul, now Paul has a chance to better influence, better persuade, better communicate with life inspiring stories. Paul has a better chance to educate and motivate because I don't say this with ego. I don't say buy Paul from an ego standpoint. I say it from a human to human level. Right. You know, what's crazy, Kat, is as a speaker, 80-90% of my audiences are businesses. They're corporations, whether associations, private companies, public companies, entrepreneurial. I am in the B2B space, no doubt. Now, the people, if I talk to 5,000 and 20 wait to talk to me after, and I literally just like my soul lights up to talk to each and every one of those 20. The majority of the 20 don't mention business after the talk. They say that they now have a newfound vision and commitment to reconnect with their son. They maybe are in a rough spot as a couple and they're coming to me and saying, there was something you said that I'm going to take back to my home. There was so it's life. It's just Paul talking to Susie, Paul talking to Peter. That may be the VP of marketing and VP of sales. No title is required to connect person to person. And that's what I learned from selling.
I love that. Yeah, especially and I feel like this comes up a lot when we're talking about story and storytelling is people front and center, humanity front and center, whether it's characters in a book or clients, or even, you know, the people who are selling, you know, that can be in a transactional relationship kind of get lost in there. But when we showcase maybe even, you know, our teams, you know, and make, like you're saying, like they're the product, not the product. You know what I mean? Like what a different way of approaching business too.
Yeah. And it's the best trust builder out there. You can't, people aren't going to trust your stories if you are not a trustworthy person. If you don't come across as trustworthy. I actually, I'll share this real quick. I did some cool collaborative work with the Navy SEALs, a buddy of mine, Rich Davini. I'll give him all the credit for this. He put together kind of the 4 C's of how you build trust, both from within and in your environment. And so there's some external factors, but he talked about competence being one, then consistency is another, and then compassion was another, and then character. So it ranged from all of these different areas from, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing over time? Am I doing something right? Like those types of things where it's so fundamental and foundational. Trust doesn't have to be this mysterious thing that we don't know how to grow or build or develop or even get better at. We can all get better in that category. And it's a part of storytelling, because if you're going to remember a story, it probably came from somebody that you trusted. And I think the way we show up, you can put on a TED Talk TED Talks are my favorite stories because it's about that singular idea that to that person is the most important idea in the world. And they're pouring themselves out of to try to connect with you so it can become something that impacts your life. And it's funny how hitting play on YouTube, within a matter of a minute, you probably have this impulse response. Do I trust this person or not? Am I drawn into them? Do I believe in their message? And trust is sprinkled in throughout that. So I think trust is an amazing through line for all of us to become more effective storytellers.
I love that. And like, how do people establish trust so quickly, especially like that on the stage? Like, how are they getting people enrolled right off the hop and trusting in them? What do you think is the ingredient?
Yeah. So two things that I think in the first 5 minutes, you have to knock both of these out. One is connection to the audience. And by that, I mean, you need to show up authentically as one of them. And so that requires all of the research up front. That requires speaking their language to the point of the words that they use. It involves, if it's day 3 of a 3-day conference, and if you were at days 1 and 2, it's integrating stories in a fun, provocative, insightful way to say, hey, last night at the reception, yesterday, and you pull in content and you connect, because now they say, oh, you're one of us. You're one of us, and you really want to do that. So I think that's one. And then the second as a speaker is it's likability. And the fastest path to likability, A, authenticity for sure is number one. And B is be funny. And you don't need to tell jokes to be funny. You can find a very cool and interesting way. Like here's one example. When I tell a personal story about how the best decision I ever made is who I chose to marry. And she is my rock, my best friend, my soulmate and everything. And I share an analogy of her being a massive sports fan. Literally, we met in a Vegas nightclub. And remember, Kat, when you used to buy ringtones for 99 cents? Do you remember that? So when I met my wife, I heard da-da-da, da-da-da, which was the Sports Center ringtone. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in Vegas. I found my soulmate. Anywho, fast forward, I get outvoted 1-to-1 on our marriage venue because it was where I worked. Cool thing, we got married on the field of Levi Stadium. And so I'm showing pictures in the first 5 minutes of my keynote, not as a brag, but as just this cool connection point, and it's a little self-deprecating. And then I have a picture of the two of us on the screen, and I say, I already know what you're thinking. I'm talking to the audience. I say, you look at her, you look at me, and you're probably saying, dude, you totally outkicked your coverage. And to that, I say, fact. But remember, I'm a sales guy. Yeah. So you could call this the greatest sale of my life. I love it. If I say that in the first 5 minutes of a talk, people are like, my God, this guy is kind of funny. He's kind of awesome. He's humble, even though he doesn't have to be, because look at that cool life that he's, and I'm just like, dude, I'm one of you. So let's go. And then I get into the meaty and juicy content because now they're on Team Paul and I already proved that I'm one of them.
I love it. And you might have answered my next question already, which is, I mean, you're an author and you're in a speaker on stages. Is there a difference in the way that you tell story or craft story, depending on the outlet?
There's nuances that are different, but I think the core tenets stay the same. As an example, I think the best stories, of course, the character development is part of it. I think the tension, this is not just about feel good. Yeah, you want that hero's journey. You want that light at the end of the tunnel. You want the happy ending to the story. Hopefully you get there, but there has to be some pain. There has to be a setback. There has to be an obstacle. So I would say whether I'm speaking or writing, those elements are tried and true. But as an example, when I'm speaking, because you can see body language, you can get a sense of the physical environment. Maybe there's a graphic behind me in my slides that supports my story, so I don't need to elaborate as much. Versus if I just shared that story about my wife and I in a book, I would have to go into more detail because I'd have to spell it out for you because I don't have those other advantages that can cut some words out. And so it's the same mentality, same setup, same process, but I would say based on the medium, you may just need to drill into more detail.
I love it. Yeah, and we're hearing this in the interview, and I wanted to, we had a conversation earlier that I want to come make sure we get to, which is like uh that you're out there, you're doing what you're doing to change lives. And when we were talking about it, um, you know, that people don't think they matter or that their
Mm.
story matters. And I just love what you were speaking into, that, the ripple effect that one person had. I'd love to for you to expand on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is all in how you define impact. It's all about, you mentioned legacy at the beginning of our talk.
Hmm.
And I would challenge everybody listening in to say that whether it is a retirement party professionally or the celebration of your life personally, when you reflect back and you deeply think about how you want to be remembered, even to the point, some advisors that I've had had said, write out your eulogy. And I know it sounds morbid, and I would say absolutely not. It might be a painful process. It might take you to some places you didn't want to go to, but until you have clarity around legacy and how you want to be remembered, how could you possibly reverse engineer your life to the present day so that you can control your decisions, behaviors, and actions to fulfill the legacy that you want to leave? So
Mm.
that's how I look at life. The chapters that matter the most start in this moment. They start in this moment and they end whenever physically you're told it's over. And you have to craft and narrate this journey that you really believe in. And so, yeah, Kat, I would just say that's the key, is if we are going to live the life that we ultimately want, if we're going to craft a story that we ultimately want, and you got to think about, if you could positively impact one life, like my dad was a continuation high school teacher. Here's a very good example.
Yeah.
Maybe the quantity of people that he taught. And by the way, I lost him at 19. So this is very much a legacy story. And continuation schools, kids have been given up on. Literally, I ran into students years after he passed, and multiple said, your dad was the first person that ever believed in me. Another told me, your dad gave me a reason to think that tomorrow is worth it.
Hmm.
When you hear things like that, does it even matter if my dad impacted 2 students, 20, 200? We hope it's a massive number. But even if it was just a handful, those 2 people sharing with me what my dad did for them, it changed my life. So
Yes.
my dad literally could have changed one. And because that one conversation with me inspired me to become a thought leader when I speak and I write, it is my dad's spirit that is poured into every word. And because of that, think about it, Kat. If I spoke to 10 million people between now and my last day, that one person my dad impacted technically had a ripple effect to 10 million people. So
Mm.
it's never too small. You never
Yes.
know who that person is going to connect with a day or a generation later. So you just have to be true to building the legacy, starting with the daily decisions, behaviors, and actions that get you closer to that game plan. And that ultimately is how I would encourage anybody to say, it is never too small. It is not the size that counts. It is just you being a mission-driven messenger, period.
Ooh, I love that. I love that, Paul. I love that. Um, yes, I get to we get to have another conversation. I know you get to go and impact lives. So, is there, before we go, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience today?
Now, I think just going back to what we've already discussed about storytelling being the ethos of this conversation. And I would say this, actually, yeah, there is something different I want to share. So the way you talk to yourself versus the way you talk to others, sometimes it's drastically different. In general, I think we try to be kind and polite and generous and good to others, but then sometimes the way we talk to ourselves is not so positive. It could be via self-limiting belief. It could be just being too hard on yourself, not giving yourself enough grace. Like we all make mistakes. We all have setbacks, and sometimes maybe it is our fault. But I would say this, if we talk to others the way we talk to ourselves, it can be a very vicious world. And so I just want to encourage people in a time right now where we're going through a storm. We're not out of storms. There's always going to be storms. Adversity is always going to knock on our door. just make sure that you maintain a positive sense of energy, of hope and optimism, because good things are happening out there. And so, you flip on the news, and I don't even care what your channel is, and there's kind of a divisive piece to it. And my philosophy is, let's focus on things that unite people. We need to come together right now, not be divided. And so that's a narrative I care about. That's the news channel I'm going to watch, is bringing people together. And if you're not going to find that on television, how can you surround yourself with a tribe of like-minded and like-hearted people that experience life the way that you want to experience it? And I don't care if it's one person or 50 or 100, that's your tribe. That's your tribe. That's who you connect with. That's where you source your daily energy from. And that's a life worth living.
I love it, Paul. I love that. I love that. For everybody watching at home, we'll be sending you a link to Paul. I think you have an offer, something to share with our listeners today.
Yeah, it's what we kicked off with. So your 5-minute why discovery. There are 9 possible whys in the world, and I am fired up for you to know exactly which one of the 9 is yours. It literally takes 5 minutes. So we'll link this, I'm sure, in the show notes as well.
Yes.
But the website is Why Institute. So whyinstitute.com/purpose. That's whyinstitute.com/purpose. I already covered the investment. It is my gift to every single one of every audience member, every attendee of this amazing conference, because it's just a gift from the heart, and it's a gift that can change lives if people choose to step into it.
Love it, Paul. Thank you for everything you're doing. Love chatting with you. I love what you're up to. For those watching, also, there's going to be a Power Story workshop on October 24th. So keep an eye out for that. More amazing interviews coming up. So stay tuned. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Paul. And I'll see you soon. Bye.